The Vikings weren't an empire of land. They were an empire of ships. They left behind no marble palaces, no great walled cities, no sprawling capitals to defend their borders. Instead, their boundaries, they were the reach of their sails. Their roads, they weren't stone-paved highways like Rome, but they were saltwater tracks carved by oar and wind. From the frozen fjord of Norway to the silver markets of Byzantium, from Greenland's ice-crushed edges to the wooden coasts of Newfoundland, their ship was their nation. And that begs the question, how? How did scattered farmsteads, tucked into narrow valleys and fjords where goats outnumbered men, how did they become a people who touched every horizon of the medieval world? How did fishing villages and sheep pastures transform into a force so feared, so reaching, that even the kings of Christendom trembled at their sails? The answer is their ships. But how did those ships make such a difference? Why did they matter so much? And if we're honest, what does that mean for us today? To begin to understand, you have to stand on the deck of the ship yourself. You see the sky break from black to twilight, and the first hint of color across the sea. There is no land in sight, not east, not west, not anywhere. Only the endless heave of North Atlantic rolling like a relentless beast beneath the hull. You stand on the deck of a Viking longship, your breath sharp in the morning cold. Every sense is alive. The pain is real. The fatigue is real. A night of rowing in the deep is no small feat. Forward is the only path. There is no other option. With the first signs of light on the horizon, your mood begins to change from survival to hope. In that moment, the smell hits first. Tar, thick on the planks. It's beneath your boots. Pitch that seeps into your clothes until you carry the ship's scent in your very skin. You're grateful for it and have come to love that smell because it's the difference between dry feet and sinking to the bottom of the Atlantic. A memory flashes in your mind of a comrade whose boat never returned. The mead hall told stories of Hafgufa swallowing their ship, but you know the truth. It was a leaky vessel. The wood was rotting and the pitch was haphazardly applied. You warned him not to go. As the emotion begins to return, a gush of seawater lashes across the bow. It sprays your face and soaks through the wool of your tunic. The taste of salt is on your lips. It is impossible to avoid. The cracks on your lips and your hands, they sting as the salt hits the raw cuts. The discomfort is all too familiar, and every swallow tastes like the ocean itself. Beneath your feet, the clinker-built planks creak, each seam sealed with tar, flexing as the waves lift and drop the hull. You swear the ship has a pulse, as though it is less of a tool and more of a living creature carrying you into the unknown. The helmsman, hunched over his great steering oar at the stern, barks orders above the roar of the sea. His voice is shredded, half swallowed by the wind, but every word carries urgency. He leans his full weight into the tiller, wrestling against the pull of the current. His hair is plastered to his face with the spray and salt, his knuckles white as they clinch the worn wood. The ship would buck and spin without him, swallowed in an instant by the hungry sea. Your oar waits, long, heavy, its shaft rough. In your blistered hands, you drop onto the bench beside your crewmates, 40 men in 2 rows, shoulder to shoulder, knees knocking, all bound to the same rhythm. A drum beats somewhere near the prow, slow, insistent, the heartbeat of survival. You lean into the pull, arms screaming from exhaustion. Blisters tear open and weep with salt. Sweat stings your eyes, but you keep pulling. If one man falters, the rhythm breaks and the whole ship suffers. The man beside you grunts in time with the chant. His breath steams white in the frozen air, his eyes sunken with sleeplessness. He has rowed all night, so have you. The bench beneath you is slick with sweat, salt, and blood rubbed raw from the work. The stench is thick, men packed close, wool gone damp, and sour salt fish rotting in a barrel somewhere near the stern. But there is no complaining. Not here. Not when the sea waits to punish weakness. You glance up. The horizon is endless, merciless. Behind you lies the safety of home, green valleys, familiar mountains, fields you once plowed. Ahead, there's nothing but risk. Storms you can't predict, enemies you can't see, rocks that can tear a ship into splinters in a heartbeat. And yet, there is no turning back. The chant rises. Heave! Heave! The oars bite into the water. The ship surges forward. The sound is hypnotic. Wood grinding, water slapping, men groaning, the drum keeping time like the moon waning and waxing. In this moment, you are no longer one man. You are one body. A body of 40, one beast pulling against the sea. The cold, it gnaws at you. The wind cuts through every seam of your cloak, every hole in your wool, until your bones themselves seem brittle. Your cheeks are leathered raw. Your teeth ache from clenching against the sting. Every breath tastes of iron and salt. The ocean stretches around you like a vast graveyard. It's gray and empty, and the thought creeps in. One storm, one mistake, and no one will ever know where you fell. But there's something else beneath the fear. A pulse of defiance. The same pulse that drives the ship forward. You know why you're here. For silver, for land, for story, for honor, for family. Because the farm at home cannot contain you. Because no one is remembered for planting barley, but men are remembered for daring the sea. The helmsman yells again, his voice breaking. Starboard oars, pull harder. You shift, heave, your muscles shrieking as you drag against the current. The ship shudders, swings, steadies. You feel the power of it. You feel the frame of wood and wool because it has become now a spear cutting through the sea wide open. And for the first time, you realize the truth that this ship is not just carrying you, it is transforming you. Your world is no longer the valley. It's not the farm, not the hearth. Your world is the deck, the oars, the chant, the sail. You belong not to the land, but to this vessel, to this community of sweat and blood and rhythm. Your identity, your honor, your very survival, everything depends on the ship. The sea roars louder. Gulls begin to circle overhead, shrieking. Somewhere far off, that means that there is land. It's unseen. It's a foreign shore, England perhaps, or maybe Ireland, or maybe just another island of rock and scrub, nameless and empty. But that doesn't matter now. The truth is simple. It's sharp. You are on the edge of the world, with nothing but a hull of oak between you and death. And still you pull, still you chant, still you dare. Above, the sail snaps like a whip, loud, sudden, alive, made of wool stretched and stitched, striped in faded red and brown. It bellies out, and the wind punches through. Each gust shoves against your back. It rattles the rigging and turns the whole vessel into something that groans and shudders just like it's breathing. And you welcome it because it means you don't have to row. Your strength and resilience and determination, they're all enhanced by the forced row. But the wind is a gift that every seasoned sailor welcomes. That is what it meant to be a Viking, to live on the edge of risk, to build your life not on land, but on water, not with walls, but with sails. This was no empire of fortresses, no nation defined by borders. It was an empire of ships, flexible, powerful, a living thing that bound sacred villages into a single people. And it's here, on the deck of these longships, that we begin to understand how the Vikings became more than farmers and raiders, how they became the people who reached further than anyone of their age, how they turned scattered fjords into a civilization that left its mark from Newfoundland to Byzantium. The ship was their nation. And today we're going to see why it mattered so much. They were not bound by walls or roads, but by the sea itself. To understand the Viking, you must understand the vessel that carried them. Because every raid, every trade, every legend begins with a ship. And the ship was more than wood and sail. It was the spine of their world. The Vikings didn't build their world upon castles of stone. They built it upon wood, tar, wool, and iron nails, upon ships that called them to war. To call them war machines is too small. A longship was a community project, a lifeline, and a symbol of status and survival. A chieftain could count his wealth in cattle, in silver, in sons, but it was a ship that crowned him with power. One vessel could feed a family for years, bring a village its fortune, or carry men into sagas. The construction was a marvel of design. Planks overlapped in a method we call clinker-built. Each board fastened to the next like scales on a serpent. This gave the hull both strength and flexibility. It could bend with the sea instead of breaking against it. The draft ran shallow. The same ship that braved the open ocean could slip upriver or glide into hidden estuaries. A Viking ship could land on a beach, land its crew in a moment, and be gone before resistance gathered. Oceans and rivers alike yielded to this design. But the genius of the ship wasn't just in the wood. It was in what it represented. Every man in a village had a stake in one. Farmers cut timber for their land. Blacksmiths forged rivets. Women spun wool for sails. They dyed it red with root and brown with oak bark. When the hull was raised, it stood as a collective effort, a monument to the people who built it. The ship was their survival stitched together plank by plank. And so, when a longship slipped down its ramp into the water for the first time, it carried not only its crew, but the whole identity of the settlement behind it. This was why sagas remembered ships by name. The Long Serpent. They were more than tools. They were characters in the story of the North. A chieftain without a ship was a leader without reach. He couldn't raid, couldn't trade, couldn't carry his honor to foreign shores, but a man who owned ships, his reputation stretched as far as the wind could carry him. To give a gift of a ship was to give not just wood and sail, but a future, a destiny. And the ship's symbolism didn't end with life. Many Vikings were buried in them. Their chiefs laid beneath the deck, now turned to graves, surrounded by goods, weapons, and sacrifices. The ship was not only a vessel for sea voyages, it was a vessel that carried, in their beliefs, souls from this world to the next. This is why when we speak of Vikings, we can't separate their identity from their ships. Every plank carved, every sail hoisted, every oar stroke was the heartbeat of their civilization. They were not an empire of land. They were an empire of ships. And on these ships, the North itself learned to reach beyond its horizon. But here's the twist. An empire of ships, it needs places to land. Not marble harbors or imperial docks, just enough shore to drag a hull onto it, enough stone to build a ramp. The Vikings didn't anchor their world in grand cities. They scattered it across hidden beaches, fjords and rivers' mouths, soft harbors that made them both everywhere and nowhere all at once. Rome, It had its marble ports, stone piers. The Norse had something else entirely. They had nature. Their harbors were not monuments carved from granite, but fjords that cut like knives into the coastline, river mouths that opened like throats, and beaches that tucked so tight against the cliffs they could vanish in a storm's shadow. This was the genius of the Viking world. The sea itself was their infrastructure. No need for massive ports, no need for royal harbors where all ships bowed to one city's command. Instead, every clan, every chieftain, every coastal farmstead could carve out its own landing place. A stretch of flat stone, it became a dock. A narrow ramp cut into turf, it became a spillway. A wooden shed built with stones at its base became shelter for a ship through the winter. Archaeologists find them still. Ship sheds, stone-lined ramps, grooves where keels once slid down into the sea. No single harbor to blockade, no single city to burn. Power in the Viking Age was scattered, flexible, hidden in hundreds of inlets. This made the longship into a phantom. One morning, a monastery on English coast might see sails rise out of the mist, longships slipping silently from a beach no one had ever charted. By the time local levies gathered, the ships, they were gone, already gliding to another fjord, vanished beyond the cliffs that hide them, as well as any fortress wall. To an enemy, this was chaos. Where would the Vikings strike next? We have no idea. From which cove, from which mouth of which river, which shallow beach would their ships emerge? The answer was any of them, all of them. And just as quickly, they could vanish back into the labyrinth of fjords that stitched Norway, Denmark, and Sweden together. The Romans, they built empires on the strength of their roads. The Vikings built theirs on the ability of their ships and the slipperiness of their harbors. And that was a terror to the rest of the world. You could never predict where the dragon-prow ship would land, where and when and how it would just disappear. Their world was scattered, yet it was connected. In an empire without walls, it was bound together, not by stone, but by water. And if the hidden harbors made the Vikings unpredictable, it was the seamanship that made them unstoppable. A ship could be built by many hands, but only a crew that knew the sea's secrets could carry it beyond the horizon. The North Atlantic is not forgiving. It is very treacherous water. Its waves rise like walls, its fog blinds like smoke, its storms fall without warning. Yet the Vikings crossed it in open vessels. No compass to steer by, no maps to trust. How? With the oldest tools a sailor could carry: the sky, the sea, and a good memory. They watched the heavens with an intimacy modern sailors rarely know. The sun was their anchor. On bright days, its arc traced the ship's path. On overcast mornings, they may have used sunstones, crystals like Icelandic spar that split light and revealed the sun's location even on cloudy days. They read birds too. Gulls directed, hinted at nearby land. A flight of ravens could guide them to shore when the horizon offered nothing but gray. The greatest map was their memory. A helmsman knew the feel of currents against his oar, the smell of salt mingled with earth. When the land was near, the taste of water that shifted as the rivers joined the sea. The coastlines of home lived inside his mind like a song, passed down from older men who had traced every inlet, every rock, every tide. These were not charts written in ink. They were stories carved into memory, the memory of sailors who carried the world in their heads. On board, rhythm was survival. Oars did not move in chaos, but in perfect unity. A drum beat at the prow, or sometimes the call of a chant of the leader, it set the pace. Each pull of the oar was timed, muscle to muscle, man to man, until 40 bodies became one machine. The sound was hypnotic, rhythmic. Heave, splash, heave, splash. The sea answered in its own chant. Storms tested more than wood. They tested the unity of the men on board. A wave could snap a mast. A reef could gut the hull. In those moments, no man could think of himself. Each hand was the ship's hand. Each body represents the strength of the ship, its unity. Seamanship was not merely skill, it was trust, forged through repetition. That was the heart of it. A Viking ship was a marvel of design, but design alone could not cross oceans. It needed men who could hear the sea's language, who could pull together as one heartbeat, who could weather the wind and the storm together. Seamanship was survival, and survival in the Viking world, that meant glory. Seamanship is what gave the Vikings the skill to master the sea, but skill alone doesn't hold a ship together. It's the men on board. The longship was more than timber and sail. It was, you might say, a floating society. Every crew had its rhythm, had its hierarchy, a fragile balance. At the stern stood the helmsman, trusted to steer both the ship and every soul on board. Alongside him, the lookout, sharp-eyed and tireless. And all the while, warriors doubled as rowers, their strength tested not just in battle, but in the grind of the oar. Life at sea, it was brutal in this simplicity. Sleep came in short bursts, rolled in cloaks beneath the open sky or crammed beneath awning. The cold, it was constant, and the damp, unshakable. Salt hardened until they cracked, and every mouth tasted of brine. Yet, amid the hardship was a fierce camaraderie. They ate shoulder to shoulder. They sang together to keep time, traded stories that blurred fear into laughter. To survive the sea was to trust the man beside you. Discipline was not written down. There were no courts at sea, no laws carved into the oak. Instead, reputation ruled. To falter at the oar, to fail to hold the line in a storm, was shame that clung longer than any wound. No one wanted to be a man whispered about in the sagas as a weak link, the one who broke the rhythm and doomed the crew. This unity between brothers on board, the strength that came from tireless rowing over and over, meant that these rowers, these shipmates, they became brothers in arm. They were strong, their muscles ready to fight for who knows how long. Their endurance was greater than anyone they would have met on land, someone who had an easy life in England. Now, picture what it would have been like as part of a crew and the pressure on each member to row and to do their part. In the midst of a storm, the sea rears up, black and mountainous, hurling spray like fists of ice. The ship bucks, the deck is heaving beneath your feet. Oars snap from their locks. The ocean is trying to pull them from your grip. Salt blinds your eyes, stings raw cuts on your hands. The helmsman's voice rips through the roar, bellowing for rhythm, for unity, for life. And you row, not alone, not as one man, but as a crew, 40 bodies chanting in time, each stroke a defiance, hurled into the teeth of the storm. Every movement isn't just your survival, it's everyone else's too. The ocean wants to scatter you, but the bond of men welded together is tighter than iron, and it keeps the ship whole. That was the crew life, brutal, cramped, merciless, and yet glorious. For in the Longship's company, every man knew he belonged to something greater than himself. This was a world with no highways, no airports, no phones, just mountains, forests, and the sea that separated you from your neighbors. And for most people in the early Middle Ages, that made the world feel small. But not to the Vikings. Their world was vast. And here's a personal theory that I have from traveling all over the world. The more you see of this amazing world that we live in, the more you want to see. The Vikings saw a lot, and they never stopped exploring. Their ship was like their passport, their plane, and their ticket to wherever they wanted to go. Think about it. A simple ship connected scattered farms in Norway to monasteries in Ireland, markets in England, and palaces in Constantinople. A man who had never traveled more than a mile inland could find himself standing in the Hagia Sophia. You might even carve a rune or two in the marble when no one's looking. And it's all because of the Vikings' longship. It carried them to wherever they wanted to go. And the most amazing fact is this. Those ships, they weren't built by empires, not commissioned or commanded from capitals. They weren't subject to mighty kings in far-off places. They were raised in fjords, carved by farmers, financed by communities. The empire of ships was decentralized, and that is where the power was. With them, the Norse outpaced every rival. They could strike at dawn and be gone before help arrived. Then they could sail the same vessel south to trade in silk, in wine, and in spices. It stretched further, faster, and with more daring than any neighbor could match. But the true power wasn't only in where their ships could go. It was in what they made of the men on them. Crews that forged bonds in hunger, in rowing, in storms. Bonds that made them fearless in battle, tireless in exploration. The shield wall on land was strong because the rhythm of the oar at sea had already welded them together. They trusted each other. And when a chief died, the Viking thought, what greater monument could there be than the ship itself? They found ships buried in the earth, carved into runestones, sung into sagas. The vessels that carried them across the sea would now, in their view, carry them into eternity. The ships weren't just tools, they were symbols, they were shrines, and they were stories. And so the great metaphor remains. The Vikings were not an empire of land, they were an empire of ships. Every plank was a promise, every sail a declaration, every oar a heartbeat. Their ship turned isolation into connection, turned survival into story, turned farmers into explorers, and raiders into kings. The Vikings remind us that an empire isn't always about drawing lines on a map. Their strength came not from borders, but from boats that acted as bridges, from the connections that they forged across seas and cultures. In that way, the longship wasn't so different from our mediums that we depend on today. Think of it, our ships are different, but the impulse is the same. We build networks through the internet, air travel, global trade. We connect not by walls, but by cables and flights and digital sails stretched across invisible horizons. Like the Viking world, our world is decentralized, scattered, and yet more connected than any empire of stone that they could have ever dreamed of. That's the legacy of the longship. It wasn't only about raids and trades. No, it was about exploration. It was about creating a medium that bound people together and propelled them outward and onward. A community's mission that became a cultural identity. So when we speak of Viking ships, we're not just talking about ancient wood rotting in museums or skeletons of vessels buried in mounds. We're talking about the way humans, they turn technology into destiny, and a people that use the resources at their disposal to venture into the unknown and return as legends. Every plank nailed, every oar raised, every sail hoisted, every one was a statement. The ship carried not just individual men, but an entire Norse world. The Vikings remind us that greatness is rarely found in staying put. It's found in the risk of setting sail and building something together that carries us beyond the horizon. Now, if this episode stirred something in you, don't let it fade. Don't let the sail run out of wind. Share it. Rate the podcast. Send it to a friend who needs to be reminded that history, it's not just about the past. It's about the courage to build, to connect, and to venture into the exciting unknown. What lies just beyond the horizon? Go and find out. And until next time, be bold, be strong, and awaken the Viking in you.